From headlines to heartbeats, this is More Than News with Chris Moore. Buckle up for a journey beyond the surface, where we uncover the real stories shaping our world.
Hey there, it's Chris Moore with More Than News. So glad you're joining us today. I've got one of my I was just telling Serge here at Apex Club, probably my favorite interview. I mean, I've interviewed all kinds of people, but Brooks, you are amazing. It is State Representative Brooks Landgraf. Thanks for joining us.
Well, Chris, it's great to be with you. I appreciate the invitation. Congrats on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are one of the best interviewers in all of the Permian Basin, maybe all of Texas. And it's an honor to be here with you, and especially at a great place like the Apex Club.
Is the Apex Club not incredible? If you're ever here, come on by.
I highly recommend it, yes.
Absolutely. Okay, we've got so much to talk about. You're about to catch a plane to Houston, so we're going to try to get everything in. First, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Brooks Landgraf, and I'm very honored to serve as the state representative for 4 counties here in the Permian Basin, which is known as House District 81, but it includes Ector County, Loving County, Ward County, and Winkler County. And I was first elected, took office in 2015, which is hard to believe that it's been that long.
Almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years, but it's really flown by. It's a lot of hard work, but I really enjoy getting to serve my fellow West Texans, about 200,000 of us. And my goal is just to be their voice in the process that allows us to make, repeal, or amend laws for the state of Texas down at the Texas Capitol. And that's what I do. But it's a real honor to be able to do it. And I'm always looking for ways to do the job better, as you know. And so I really try to make sure that I'm staying in touch with my constituents. And I think it helps that I continue to live and work. I have a day job here in West Texas in addition to serving as a state representative. My wife and I have a daughter who just started the 4th grade in public schools.
She's
in Odessa,
adorable.
and she is adorable. I'm not going to argue with that. But so that means that I'm dealing with the same things that most of the people I represent and serve are dealing with in the same way that they are and in real time. And a lot of lawmakers complain about that, but I think it actually makes me better prepared to do the job better because I'm having to go through life the same way that all my constituents are.
And that is so very important right now because, like you said, almost 10 years in the office and how it has changed in those 10 years. You know, we didn't know about fake news back in the day. We weren't worried about our border back in the day. There's so much stuff going on right now, especially in Texas, because we know that they are attacking Texas, whether it be the border, whether it be our oil and gas sector. But there's a little segment that people don't know about. It's our rainy day fund, and you're calling it the Texas Strong Fund, and you've got a lot of big plans for that. Yeah. What are they?
Well, first of all, I'll be happy to talk about the Texas Strong Fund, but you're right. Texas is ground zero for a lot of national politics. Yeah. And, we're not a swing state or anything like that. We are firmly a red state, and it's going to take very deliberate actions on our part if we're going to keep it that way. And so we have a lot of people, myself included, who are working to keep Texas red. For me, especially here in the 2024 election cycle, the question is how much are we going to run up the score? But we have to always be vigilant that there are forces here in the United States that want to turn Texas blue. They've made some half-hearted attempts, some more serious attempts. And I think that there's certainly an effort underway to continue doing that because they know that if they flip Texas from red to blue, then it's kind of game over as we know it in the United States of America. And so for all of us who believe in limited government and a conservative way of life, then it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we're doing our part to keep Texas red, because as goes Texas, so goes the nation. And you're absolutely right, Chris. The reason why we are such a focal point is because we have the longest international border of any state in the country. Mm-hmm. We are ground zero for Biden's immigration policies that have routinely and unsurprisingly failed. We're doing everything that we can at the state level to mitigate the disaster that is the Biden border policy, and they hate us for it. I'll just put it that way. Oil and gas, that's our bread and butter, particularly here in the Permian Basin where we're
absolutely
producing half, on certain
At
days,
least.
at least half of all oil and gas in the United States of America is coming from the Permian Basin. On a good day, but even on a not so good day, we're still producing about a third. And we've seen policy after policy be proposed by the Biden-Harris administration that would try to cut that off. And if they can't do it directly, they'll try to do it indirectly through burdensome and unreasonable environmental regulations. And so we're in a situation where we have to stand up for ourselves. And thankfully, this is Texas. We have a lot of experience standing up for ourselves, and we're going to continue to. But the stakes are very high, and that's why it's important for us to do that.
Okay, my mind is going all over the place. Before we actually started recording, I was like, Representative Landgraf, where are we going to go exactly? Yeah. Real quick, I just want to hit on the fact that Governor Abbott has dismissed over 1 million illegals that had registered to vote here. So we know that that is strong here in Texas, that is why they've opened our border. But what I really like is the Texas Strong Fund is addressing so many things. Part of it is election, part of it is mental health, part of it is teachers. So kind of give us what the plan is.
Well, so that's a lot of unrelated things, right? Or
I know. It doesn't sound like it goes together, but it does.
Well, yeah, and let me set the stage. And I kind of wish that, and sometimes I can nerd out when it comes to policy, and this is definitely that. So I can tie it all together. And really what this comes down to is, for those of us who live and work in the Permian Basin and other energy producing areas, we know that when times are good and you're working in the oil field, you can make a lot of money. But when you're coming home, especially if you're raising a family, things can be a little bit of a challenge. And that is because the oil field has such high paying jobs that other parts of our local society struggle. So if you're making good wages out in the oil field, it makes it difficult to retain an adequate law enforcement presence, right? Because police officers can make more money in the oil field. Even nurses at hospitals can make more money in the oil field. And so that can put a strain on the healthcare system. We also know that with increased activity in oil and gas production, there comes with that much higher rates of commercial vehicle traffic, whether it's sand haulers or other oil field traffic. And that's all absolutely necessary.
Absolutely.
So the goal is we need to make sure that that's accommodated through better transportation infrastructure. So the bottom line is that when the oil field goes up, that's great, and we want to make sure that that can continue to happen. But it can also take a toll on other parts, other aspects of our community. And so what we have, I think, a solution to so many of those things, whether it's a law enforcement officer shortage, a teacher shortage, which we see anywhere that oil and gas is produced.
Okay, I'm going to pause you real quick. With the teacher shortage, what people don't realize with the open border at the school systems, they're trying to hire teachers that can speak 20 different languages because of the kids that are coming across the border. That's just a small part of what they're looking at right now.
That's another reason why we have to have a secure border. And it's, Chris, I always get so frustrated when people on the left are talking about that this is, that somehow the Operation Lone Star that we have here in Texas and have had for the last 3 years, that's been successful in terms of limiting human trafficking, limiting the illegal importation of fentanyl and other drugs. We've put a big dent in that thanks to Operation Lone Star and using tax dollars from Texas taxpayers. None of it's free, but it's the job that we're doing because the Biden-Harris administration has refused to do their job at the border. And as we all know, it's a constitutional responsibility of the federal government to secure international borders. And so this is actually their job. But if they're not going to do it, we can't just sit idly by and let there be an invasion at our southern border, because, as you've mentioned, it has an impact on so many things in Texas and really throughout the country. But Texas is on the front lines of this fight. But yeah, we're seeing it manifests itself in our schools, in our hospitals. In fact, Governor Abbott just requested that hospitals produce records showing how much of their funding is spent for uncompensated care for illegal immigrants. because that's another cost that's borne by Texas taxpayers, and it's also being borne specifically by taxpayers at the local level where these hospitals are, because ultimately hospitals just have to eat those costs if there's not payment from the patient or their insurance company. So, so Governor Abbott rightly has asked for basically an audit of how much that's actually costing, because the federal government has never done anything like that.
Would they ever compensate Texas, do you think, for the money that is spent? That's one question.
Yep.
Second question is, why aren't they taking care of it?
So the answer to the first question is, unfortunately, no.
Probably not.
And the reason why we know that is because the state of Texas has actually sent a bill, by bill, I mean like an invoice,
right.
We're sending the receipts to Washington, D.C., to the administration, and asking them to reimburse us for the costs associated with doing their job for them. And so far, we have not received any payment on those invoices. And so I do think that I'm not going to sit here and hold my breath and expect Washington or the Biden-Harris administration to do the right thing.
Right.
So that's the answer to that question. The second question that you have is, why not? I mean, yeah, whether I shudder to think, I mean, I can sit here and, give what my theories are for that. And that is that they want to fundamentally change the country, whether
from red to blue, of course.
Right. And so, there does seem to be some evidence that that's the case, but, regardless of what their intentions are, we have to stop it. And that's what we're focused on doing here in Texas.
Okay, but part of the other things that you're going to be taking care of with the Texas Strong is, and this all comes out, let's explain the rainy day fund, because people don't understand what that is and how we get it. And Texas has a lot of a rainy day fund.
We do. All right. So I'm going to give myself license to kind of nerd out here a little bit.
That's all right. Please do.
So in Texas, when any producer draws oil or natural gas from the ground and sells it to market, the state for many, many decades, long before I was in office, has levied a production tax on that. We call it the severance tax for oil, severance tax for natural gas.
Right.
And that money right now is collected by the state, and it goes to 3 different pots. So the first one is the state highway fund, which is, I think, a great expenditure for it.
I do too. And you worked hard for it. Thank you.
And we have, kind of unrelated to that, we've done a really good job about getting a much larger amount of money back here in the Permian Basin, because I have gone down to the Capitol and made the argument that, hey, look, that money's coming from here in the first place. We need to reinvest it.
Exactly.
And so we've been successful, and we've seen 6 years in a row of record-breaking funding for transportation infrastructure in the Permian Basin. Very proud of that. So State Highway Fund is one source for this oil and gas severance tax. The second is the Foundation Schools program, which helps fund public schools all across the state of Texas, also a very worthy cause. The third third destination for this oil and gas severance tax is something called the Economic Stabilization Fund. Most of us just call it the Rainy Day Fund. It was set up about 30 years ago, and it's designed to take care of certain needs in case the state has a dip in the economy, or if there are, kind of one-time projects. So it's a good fund to have. Our the bond rating agencies that look at the overall health of the fund or the resources of the state of Texas, they want to see that you have a nice savings account. That's how you can get, a double A rating or a triple A rating, the ones that allow you to be able to borrow money. So that it's important to have that. But at a certain point, you can almost have too much money in there. The other problem that we're running into in Texas is that the Rainy Day Fund, when it was set up 30 years ago, it was designed to have a cap. And 30 years ago, you might recall, oil and gas wasn't doing very well in Texas. Nobody really thought that we would get.
Kinda.
Well, maybe not you. Some older folks would understand.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Thank you.
But nobody ever thought that it would fill up as fast as it did. But here we are in 2024, and we are actually on the brink of the Rainy Day Fund reaching its constitutional cap, which will be about $25 billion. And so, so which is something that was never anticipated. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
But that kind of shows how successful Texas is. And that's what people don't realize is we are right here in the Permian Basin. We are creating all that money.
That's right. I mean, what happens at a wellhead in Wink is what allows us to have the high rises in Houston, right? And so in order to make sure that we can continue doing that for as long as there is an appetite in the world for oil and gas, which I think is going to be here for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely.
And then some. And that is that we have to continue taking care of this little miracle that we have going here in the Permian Basin. And the way that we can do that is, all right, so talking back about the rainy day fund. So it's beginning to overflow. It's going to reach this constitutional cap. Well, no, but and again, this is a moment that 30 years ago was not even imaginable in the state of Texas. In fact, with the rainy day fund was set up for the first several years that it existed, we weren't even putting any money into it because there wasn't enough to actually make a deposit into the account. And so we have to make sure that we are, first of all, wisely spending the money that is being paid by severance taxpayers,
which we know they are.
Yeah, I mean they're making. I mean it's a tax on oil and gas production, and right now that $25 billion isn't really working for anybody. Now we need to have the rainy day fund, and I'm not saying that we should get rid of it, but we probably shouldn't just be pouring money into it when it's overflowing and then not really doing.
That was my question,
right.
Is what happens when we hit that peak? Where's that money going to go?
So enter the Texas Strong Fund, which is what I proposed. And so what this will do, so you've got these three funds.
Yes, sir.
State Highway Fund, Foundation Schools Program, and the Rainy Day Fund. And then you've got this overflowing Rainy Day Fund. So what I would do with the Texas Strong Fund is I would take part of the money that is causing the Rainy Day Fund to overflow. So in other words, not touching the State Highway Fund, not touching the Foundation Schools Program.
Just the overflow.
Just the overflow from the Rainy Day Fund, and put it in this Texas Strong Fund. And Texas Strong would
fund all of these other.
That's right. Things in the oil patch.
Gotcha.
So it would put that money back in the oil patch, which is where it's coming from to begin with, and help address the struggles that communities in the oil patch are facing, especially when it comes to public sector services. So we know that you can get a good oil field job in the oil field. What you can't get sometimes is visit a fully staffed hospital or send, if you're working in the oil field.
You live here with kids.
You can't send your kids to a school that has a good teacher to student ratio because there's a shortage of teachers, because things are so expensive in the oil field. Sometimes you can't even recruit teachers to move to a community where apartment rent's $1,000 a month, or at least, or it's so expensive to pay a mortgage on a house that we just can't get the talent to move here that we need. And that's true for education, for healthcare, for first responders. And again, we also have a struggle with deteriorating infrastructure, whether it's water, whether it's transportation. And so, my goal, and you've heard me say this a million times, is I want Texas to be the best state in the country to live, work, and raise a family. And I especially want the Permian Basin, the people that I serve, to live in an area that's the best place in Texas to live, work, and raise a family. We already know that the Permian Basin is a great place to work, and people would love to move here from all over the country to be able to work in the Permian Basin. But it can sometimes be a struggle to live in and raise a family in. And so this Texas Strong Fund is designed to reinvest a portion of that overflowing revenue that's causing the Rainy Day Fund to overflow. And we invest that to kind of level the playing field in terms of the Permian Basin being able to compete with the larger metropolitan areas in terms of opportunities for teachers, for healthcare workers, for mental health professionals, for police officers, for firefighters, everything that you need to have a strong community, and that we sometimes lack in the oil patch. This is designed to do that. And by the way, we're using tax money that's coming from this area, and that otherwise would just be sitting in an account that's not being used, not even gaining interest or earning interest.
Okay, so has the Texas Strong Fund been approved?
So we have actually.
Where is it right now?
So
it has passed.
It passed in the Texas House of Representatives. I authored this during the last legislative session. We passed it with tremendous support. Of course, it takes approval in the House and the Senate.
Yes, sir.
And then this would also require a constitutional amendment like we see most Novembers, the long list of ballot propositions that have proposed constitutional amendments. So it has just never been put up for a vote in the Senate. And so in 2025, when the legislature reconvenes, that's the goal. I think we still have support to pass this in the House. My goal is to get a vote, an up or down vote in the Texas Senate for this, because I think as long as it gets a vote, it's going to have overwhelming support. Then we send it to the people of Texas, and I think we can make a very strong case.
Now, will this have to be voted on from the people in November?
Well, it would,
Will it be on the November ballot?
So if we pass it in the House and pass it in the Senate next spring, it could be on the ballot as early as November of 2025.
Okay, so not this November.
Not this November. That's
so
right.
This is something that we're working on right now.
That's right. Yeah, this would be something that, one of the priorities that I'll take with me down to the Texas Capitol for the legislative session beginning in January of 2025.
Okay, this is a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea our rainy day fund. And of course, this podcast, people can listen to it at any day and any time. But currently here in the Permian Basin, we had a snowmageddon. Now we have a rain-mageddon.
Right.
The last couple of days, it has just been flooding here, which is something very unusual, but it's something that we're very concerned about. So this is so important that this fund will go in, like you said, for infrastructure and for things like water.
Well, so I've actually been on the phone. In fact, earlier this morning, I just drove through some flooded neighborhoods up in unincorporated Ector County. I've gotten several calls
pictures
from constituents. I talked with one person who lives there just west of Andrews Highway up in northern Ector County, and they raise egg-laying hens and, sell the eggs to their neighbors and everything. And these damn floodwaters killed all of their hens, which was a tragic situation. But I mean, the flooding, especially in some areas, is as bad as I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah.
At least, here in West Texas. And
that's where the infrastructure also comes in.
No, it does. And, and some of this is, obviously you get record amounts of rainfall in a 24-hour period and things are going to happen, but we can also mitigate flood damage by having proper infrastructure in place. And there's really a very close connection between highway infrastructure and flood mitigation infrastructure. So when you build a highway, you have the appropriate kind of bar ditches so that you can evacuate floodwaters a little bit more efficiently. Also, the way that we build highways, sometimes that can act as a dam. And as long as you're diverting the water properly, it can reduce flooding in residential areas. And so I think there's an opportunity through the Texas Strong Fund to be able to make some of those improvements too, because, one neighborhood that I was in this morning, I feel terrible. There's it's the same neighborhood that's been impacted by the PBC fire in northern Ector County. And so
if people don't real quick, give them a backup of what happened. It was a company with tires, and what all was at that?
We don't know everything that was being stored at this facility. There's a Permian Basin containers facility that opened up 2 or 3 years ago outside the city limits of Odessa in northern Ector County. And in late July, a fire broke out at that facility, and the whole thing went up in flames.
Chemicals.
They primarily store storage containers that have either stored chemicals or other liquids. We can't say for certain what was in there yet. That's obviously something that's being investigated right now. But based on the way that the flames were going, based on some of the testing that's been done since, it seems like there were some chemicals that were being stored there. And firefighters from Odessa Fire and Rescue did a great job putting out the fire, but you're left with a pretty
toxic
mess after something like that happens. And so there's groundwater contamination. The air, again, I was out there this morning. It still smells like a chemical fire.
A month later.
More than a month later. And so anyway, it's bad news for the people who live and work in that neighborhood. And so I have a good relationship with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, because the House committee that I chair, Environmental Reg, has oversight over TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And so after this fire broke out and we could tell that there were, folks needed some help, I engaged TCEQ immediately, and they've been very good about helping with the remediation process. But anyway, bottom line, it's a bad situation for the people who live and work in that neighborhood, and we're trying to get it cleaned up.
But you 100% stepped in immediately and took care of it.
Yeah,
to the best of your ability.
To the best of my ability. I don't ever want to be one of these politicians who's just trying to take credit. I saw that there was a need. People were asking me specifically for help. I was, right after that fire, and I visited the site right after, and I could see that people were struggling. And the fact that this site is outside of the city limits means that it's not really the city's jurisdiction, and smaller counties like Ector County don't necessarily have the resources to handle big environmental catastrophes like this. And so I thought, well, the state of Texas is probably in a pretty good position, or maybe better than any local government, to handle this. And so, I did everything I could to engage, state officials and state resources, and I think it's helped. But I mean, that's part of my job. When the people I serve need help, I feel like it's my responsibility to do everything that I can to get them that help.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you right there. And we know there's going to be people listening to this podcast from all over the United States, and they've heard stories of train wrecks, train derailments, all kinds of chemical spills and other things. This is why elections are so important, where you can go to your state representative like Brooks Landgraf, and you have faith in that person that will take care of these kind of catastrophes. And they're not all catastrophes, but they can be inconveniences. But you have an open door policy, and that is so important. You've got social media, you are a phone call away, and that is probably why, as I said at the beginning of the interview, you're my favorite, because you are so accessible, and people, their tax dollars, they're like, what's going on with this? You let people know.
Well, thank you, Chris. That's very kind of you to say. And that is something that I try to be very deliberate about. And, it's not always good news, and sometimes I can't help, but I at least want to be able to communicate what's going on. One example, you mentioned Snowmageddon, the Winter Storm Uri that
a couple of years ago. It was terrible.
February of 2021. And, the power went out in West Texas, just like it did most parts of the state. And I just remember after a few hours of that being the case, and it felt like this is not a typical power outage, but even as an elected state official, I wasn't getting any information. It didn't feel like anybody knew what was going on, but I was getting questions. And I remember that evening, after the first kind of full day, or I guess we were less than 24 hours into it, and I went on social media and I said, look, this is a frustrating situation.
I'm frustrated.
I'm
trying to figure it out.
I'm cold just like you are, but this is also a dangerous situation. And the people of Texas deserve to have some answers. And I wish I could provide them to you right now, but I'm going to try like hell to get all the information that I can, and I'm going to provide it to you. But I don't have the answers right now. But there's failure, or more than one failure, somewhere in the chain of command on this system. And for the rest of that storm, I was providing updates as I got them in. And eventually we did get more information. But, even though the first time I kind of took to social media and said, look, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I'm going to try to find out. And people were surprisingly, at least
understanding, because they knew you were trying.
Right. But at least just hearing anything, even if it's not good news, sometimes, hearing bad news can be a little bit comforting, because you at least know that, okay, we're not the only ones in the dark, but, obviously that doesn't work if you're not trying to find that information.
Right.
So, that kind of change, and that whole week I was providing these updates, talking with anybody who did have the details, and then also in some cases putting pressure on them to find out, to get the answers that they didn't. But that's being a representative, in my view, it's a two-way street. So if I'm going to do my job to reflect the views of my fellow West Texans in the lawmaking process, they need to communicate those views and concerns to me so that I can then represent that. But then also, if there's kind of this inside-ish government information that I think people should know and have a right to know, then I need to do a good job communicating that to them, especially if it has a particular impact on the people of West Texas. And I try to do the same thing, going back to the pandemic days in 2020, when the governor would have all these executive orders. And, sometimes, it didn't, like, okay, well, what does this mean to me? Or what does this mean to my business and my family? And so I would try to, break down
be
those
the middleman,
orders and say, okay, well, this is actually what it means. And so we spent a lot of time during that pandemic just trying to make sure that everybody could understand that as well as possible. And look, it's not always good information, but as long as I'm communicating that, then I feel like I'm doing my job better than I otherwise would be.
Okay, we are going to wrap this up because I know you are on a schedule, but what I will say is we will have State Representative Brooks Landgraf back on. We haven't even addressed mental health. There's so many things going on that you are working on just feverly. So I definitely want to have you back on, but how can they contact you? What is the best way? I know you got social media, websites, and so forth.
Any way that people are comfortable reaching out to me, I want to have that conversation with my constituents, however they're most comfortable. So you can always contact my office at the Capitol, 512-463-0546. You can shoot me an email, and my email address that goes straight to my phone, my computer is brooks@brookslandgraf.com. And then, as you mentioned, very active on social media. Facebook, yes. Instagram, X, all of that stuff at Brooks Landgraf or State Representative Brooks.
And of course, this is the Texas Capitol in Austin.
That's right.
And it's State Representative Brooks Landgraf. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for taking some time and joining me today.
Chris, I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
We'll have you back. And we want to thank everybody for joining us today. Please subscribe to our channels, and we'll see you next time. I'm Chris Moore with More Than News.
You've been listening to More Than News with Chris Moore. Join us next time as we continue to dig deeper, ask tougher questions, and bring you the insights that truly matter.